This is Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Let's get into it. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. Guys, that is Daniel 2:21. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I woke up today unburdened by what has been. But we need to back up just a little bit. Just always want to say thank you so much to our donors because we are a donation-based ministry, guys. If you're wondering how we can put content out there like this, it's because we have guys like you partnering with us. Undaunted.Life /donate. That will be in the show notes. And also, guys, if you haven't left a review, a 5-star review that is, or shared the show with a friend, make sure that you do that. But guys, the reason why I feel so unburdened by what has been this morning is because of what most of you already know. And so let's back up just a touch to before Trump even announced that he was going to be running for president again in 2024. I've been very adamant on the show and had been very adamant for a very, very long time that the Trump time had gone, that January 6th had sunk any of his political chances for the future and maybe anyone that was even tangentially related to him, okay? But I need you to give me a little bit of grace over that time period because even though I was supporting Ron DeSantis, I told you, even though, it was decided that Trump was going to be the Republican nominee before I even had a chance to vote in the state of Oklahoma for somebody else, that I was going to support Donald Trump because he was the Republican representative, even though I thought he was not going to win. But this was before the Democrats started using lawfare to try to keep Trump from running. This was before Trump was almost murdered twice. This is before the Democrats threw Trump or Biden off a cliff, rather, or things like that. So you give me a little bit of grace. But that's kind of where I've been on Trump. I have not been very, very high on Trump's chances. And about a month ago, as I've told y'all before, I was sitting in Joby Martin's house with his wife and a couple of other friends, the cops, and I was basically like, yeah, I don't think that Kamala is going to lose this. I don't think Trump really has a shot. I think the mainstream media is going to do their job and make sure that she gets elected. But then about a week ago, as you heard in my episodes from last week, which again, I thought my episode on Kamala Harris was very fair and very thorough. Go back and listen to that from last week if you haven't heard that content yet. But a week ago, I was like, man, I think Trump's got all the momentum. He's got these endorsements coming out. He's doing the Joe Rogan experience. Like the things are really bending towards him. Like the troll, the epic troll at McDonald's, the epic troll with the garbage truck and all that. But then the morning of the election, I didn't feel good at all. I did not feel good about his chances at all. I had a lot of morning of pessimism, okay? Because I was just, man, the signs, everything seemed so tight. Every single pollster, all of them said that this was going to be the closest, most razor-thin election. And so with that in mind, it's like, okay, if it's going to be razor-thin and the Democrats can just, put 10,000 votes here and 15,000 votes there, don't you think that they would do that? Yeah, again, I don't think that's what turned the 2020 election, but certainly there was some of that chicanery going on. I just didn't feel good about how the results would go. But at the same time, I wasn't feeling any stress yesterday because I had gone on record and everyone had gone on record saying we're not going to know the results and who the next president's going to be for days. It's probably, remember in 2020, we didn't know until Saturday. And so I wasn't stressed at all. I was just kind of going my way through my day. And so in the morning, I had a conversation with Joby Martin on the phone. And then, headed out for my day, went and voted. Took me about an hour to get through the line. Somehow my wife it took her like 5 minutes. She had a different polling station for whatever reason because she's lucky. But we get through, I vote. I even changed some of my votes on some of the Oklahoma-based stuff while I was in the booth because there was this big group text where guys were kind of arguing back and forth in a positive way. And I was like, oh crap, I didn't realize this, didn't realize that. So I, had an interesting booth experience. I was there for quite some time. But then in terms of my feelings throughout the day is like you can't really look at the news because there's nothing really to report because the polls won't be closing for several hours. So I just went about my day. I prepped some podcasts. I did some recordings, did some other stuff, just hung out with the boys, took my son to jujitsu. We went and got pizza afterwards because that's kind of like our thing. He goes and trains and then we eat terrible food and undo the training that we just did. And then we get home. And I don't even turn on any coverage. My wife and I had some stuff that we needed to do and take care of. And so we got that taken care of. And then I started turning on the coverage. And the coverage initially was kind of all over the place where there were some good signs for Kamala, some good signs for Trump. And then you just didn't really know how this was going to break. But then as we got into the evening, close to, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock Central Standard Time, things started looking astonishingly good for Donald Trump. Astonishingly good. The Vegas odds were going from minus 200 to minus 400 to minus 1,200 to minus 4,000, right? For Trump to win the White House, to be president again. But I remember those exact same things happening in 2020. I remember going to bed in 2020 thinking, man, Trump's got it in the bag, waking up only to find out, wait, he lost Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania? Like, what in the world happened? And you might have your own narratives and thoughts around that, but that's essentially what happened. But when I woke up this morning, I woke up to news and updates and tons of messages from friends, and they all said the same thing, that Donald Trump won, that the dude actually pulled it off. So November the 5th, 2024 will go down as one of the most monumental and important days in the history of the United States because Donald Trump was elected as the 47th president of the United States. In a race where you only need 270 electoral college votes in order to become the president, Trump won 286 electoral college votes to Kamala Harris's 226. And there's so many astonishing things. One of them is that he won every single swing state. They called North Carolina and Georgia, and that was a good sign for Trump. And then, you call Nevada and Arizona, but everyone's been talking about the all-important Rust Belt states, right? He's got to win Michigan, Wisconsin, or Pennsylvania, right? He won them all. Michigan, Wisconsin, and even Pennsylvania. And they were all called on election night. But guys, in the most shocking of all revelations, and this is an evening that was filled with insane revelations, it was revealed that Trump became the first Republican president since George W. Bush in 2004 to win the popular vote. I don't care who you are. I don't care how MAGA Trumpy you are. Not a single one of you jokers thought he was going to win the popular vote. Just be honest. Not a single one of you did. Our only shot as Republicans was the Electoral College, right? Until last night. The initial counts, which, we'll get final counts probably in the next several months, but the initial counts show that Trump got around 70.1, or around, I guess it would be 71 million votes, around 71 million votes to Kamala's 66.5. So it was not even especially close and just absolutely stunning. Trump became the second person to be elected in the United States to non-continuous presidential terms. The other person is Grover Cleveland. And in addition to that, the good news just kept rolling in. The Republican Party actually took back control of the United States Senate. As of right now, we don't have a final tally. I don't have a final tally. I'm recording this the morning after the election, but it is a 100% certainty that the Republicans are taking over the United States Senate. And there's almost a 100% chance of Republicans retaining control of the House of Representatives. So that was about a 50-50 coin flip for most of the night. But when we wake up this morning, and most of the odds are 95, 96, 97% chance that they will actually at least hold a slim majority in the House of Representatives. So in all likelihood, guys, on Inauguration Day in January 20th of 2025, Republicans will have the White House, the United States Senate, and very likely the United States House. There's a lot of things that'll come out in the exit polling. We haven't seen a lot of it, but there was one big thing that came out in the exit polling that I thought was just astonishing. Trump won men by 10 points while only losing women by 8 points. Again, we thought that the abortion issue was going to get a ton of women to come out to vote to put Kamala Harris over the top. We just didn't see that end up happening. And in the end, the goal for Trump and for people supporting Trump was to make this race too big to rig. You probably heard that, too big to rig. And that's precisely what the Trump voters did. I mean, it's absolutely stunning. I do want to get into my commentary here, but as of right now, Kamala Harris has not done a concession speech. Again, this is being recorded the morning after all of this, so Kamala Harris has not done a concession speech. Hillary Clinton did do one back in 2016. I remember her wearing a purple suit, and Bill Clinton was sitting there in the back being creepy wearing a purple tie. So we'll see if that happens. But we can safely say this. I guess this coalition of the dispossessed that the Democrats tried to get together for this election was not as strong as the coalition of patriotic Americans. Apparently, it was the patriotic Americans that wanted to see America get back to her former glory, and they actually made it happen. So we're going to do a lot of commentary here, so guys, just buckle up. What an absolutely incredible morning. But from a 30,000-foot view, guys, there are 5 main reasons, at least in my opinion, why I think that Trump ended up winning the election. And I'll just go through these quickly. One is all the crap that they tried to do to stop him from running and even living, right? So whoever they is, it was the Democrats that tried to keep him from running with all the lawfare. And then people that were at least tied to Democrats, because these people certainly weren't conservatives, that tried to keep him from living by shooting him in the head, right? So there was that. That's one. The second reason I think that Trump ended up winning is that Kamala Harris is just an absolutely moronic person with apparently no redeeming qualities. So in addition to being fake and vapid, she's also not very smart. And so she just wasn't somebody that people were super excited to vote for, regardless of what the mainstream media said. The third reason is that Republicans this time around embraced early voting and all of the changes that they fought back in 2020. So they were very hesitant because Republicans are day of voters. We like getting in line. We like casting our ballot in person. But we just embraced all that this time around, and it led to a sweeping victory. Fourth reason is that Republicans actually took the ground game seriously and got a ton of people registered to vote over the last couple of years, especially in these last few months. Guys like Charlie Kirk going onto college campuses and getting, hundreds and thousands of people to vote. They had door knockers ready to go. They actually mobilized people on election day, and it worked. And the fifth reason is that Democrats decided that they were going to double and triple down on all of their crazy policies that Americans didn't actually want, right? So double down on leaving the southern border wide open, even though, 80-something% of Americans don't want the southern border wide open. Doubling down on the fact that actually voter ID is racist when like 90% of Americans think that, of course, it's not racist. Of course, you should be able to show your ID. If you have to show your ID to vote or rent a car, or to rent a car or buy a drink or something like that, of course, you should have to show it in order to vote. So there are some things that I am excited about here in the near term, some things that we'll get a little bit more information on as we go through these next several months. But how exactly are people like Elon Musk and RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard and some of the people that Trump got in his coalition, Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, how exactly are these people going to be utilized in the Trump administration? Now, someone like Tucker Carlson or Joe Rogan, these guys are not going to join the administration. They're not going to be cabinet appointees. But I think last night was one of, if not the final nail in the coffin for the mainstream media in terms of how people view them and their coverage, because his interview that Trump did with Joe Rogan had over 100 million views just on Twitter, right? His one that he did with Elon Musk had like 60 or 70 million views, and that was like a day or two before the actual election. And so when you combine Fox News and CNN and MSNBC and ABC News and CBS and all these other things, it doesn't even come close to those numbers in terms of coverage. So I can see, Donald Trump and JD Vance and all these people from the administration like going on Tucker and going on Joe Rogan just throughout the year. But we'll see how some of these people, is Elon Musk going to come in there and kind of Javier Milei this and, just kind of chop out a bunch of the fluff that's in the federal government, to be determined. Obviously, it's going to be interesting to see who some of the secretary and cabinet positions go to, so I'll be excited to see that. Also, will the Democrats lean heavily on lawfare? Because I think that they will. I think that that's their only card that they can play right now, because they're not going to have the White House, they're not going to have the Senate, and they may not have the House. And so the only thing they can do right now to really jack with Trump is try to kill him. And I'm not saying the DNC necessarily, but I'm also not saying that. But anyway, it's, potentially killing him. But the other thing is, can we keep him in a courtroom? Because a lot of Republicans and MAGA people are like, oh, he's been elected now, so all these court cases go away. No, that's not how any of this works. I think, if anything, there's going to be more court cases that are brought against Donald Trump because they have to do something to try to distract away from the administration. And the last thing here that I'm just kind of interested in, I think that Trump will do a lot of very good things in his first 100 days in office. But in my opinion, I think there is clearly no more important task than closing the southern border, deporting every criminal and rapist and terrorist that has illegally made their way into this country. Because, guys, we can deal with the people that broke our laws to come here to build a better life for themselves and their families. But right now, we need to flush the toilets of this country. And I know it might seem like kind of rough language and all that, but you don't want terrorists and rapists and murderers from another country to be in your neighborhood, do you? You don't want them hanging out around your kid's school, do you? No, these people need to be flushed the hell out of here, and I'm here for it. Okay. But here's some things that we need to keep an eye on over the next couple of months, just to kind of see how this all works out. Domestically, I'm assuming that we're going to see some cities burn, right? I don't assume that, these Antifa, these BLM, these kind of leftist people that, leftist entities are paying for their bricks and Molotov cocktails, that those people are just going to like, oh, gosh darn it, we didn't get done. Here, we'll check back in with you in 2 years. We're probably going to see some cities burning. We're probably going to see some rioting. The inauguration is going to be a complete bleep show, I think, when it comes to stuff like that. We'll see if Biden does some last-minute pardons or maneuverings as he's leaving the White House, but more on Biden here in a second. But now we need to be paying attention to China. Are they going to take this as their opportunity to move on Taiwan? Are they going to move on Taiwan before Trump is back in office? Is Russia going to turn the heat up against Ukraine? Is Israel going to still go full force against Hamas and Hezbollah, or are they going to take it easy? Is Iran going to preemptively strike Israel with their full force now? Like, we'll kind of see how those things go. But what I want to talk about now is where I think the Democrats actually messed up, okay? This is where I think they messed up. They messed up in a lot of areas, but there's three main ones that I was thinking through this morning. The first is they should have just done what I thought they were going to do, which was keep Kamala in the basement. Again, I can see myself. I'm sitting there in Joe B. Martin's kitchen, and he's asking me, we're eating sushi. He's asking me, what's going to happen? And I'm like, dude, they're not going to let her loose. They're not going to let her cackle in public. They're not going to let her step all over herself. They're just not going to do it. And then they did it because they were kind of getting some heat even from leftist media. Like, hey, why isn't Kamala doing any press conferences? Why isn't she doing interviews? Why is she just doing these kind of like hand-holding interviews with very, very pro-Kamala journalists, if you could call them that? Like, why is she only doing those things? And so what the Harris campaign decided to do is like, okay, let's get her out there. But then she goes on like sex podcasts, and she goes on these other places where she just says these meandering nonsense statements over and over. And those clips just kept getting posted all the way up until the day of the election. Guys, did y'all see where she had her phone? She was pretending to be on the phone with a voter. And then she like turned her phone to the crowd, and it was her camera app was on. She wasn't on the phone. It was just like everything about her was fake. And it's like, it's best if we can just put up this paragon of virtue that's actually not real, but we can just put up this edifice and say, this is Kamala Harris, and this is our hope, and this is all that needs to be done in order to save democracy and all this nonsense. But they just didn't do it. They could have just put her in the basement and pretended, and they didn't do it. Another reason where I think the Democrats messed up is they thought they could double and triple down on stupid with all the radical positions, and that Americans would just bend over and take it because they hate Trump so much, right? So they doubled down on the abortion stuff. They doubled down on the trans stuff. They doubled down on the open border stuff. They doubled down on the, if you say anything negative towards a man that wants to be in a woman's locker room, you're a transphobe. They doubled down on all these things, and they just assumed that Americans were just going to be like, yeah, okay, yeah. And because Trump was such an unlikable person, and everyone had already had their mind made up about Trump, and he was horrible, and he was Hitler, Orange Hitler, and all those things. They thought they could just triple and double down on everything without having their pulse on, or their thumb on the pulse of the American people. And the last thing that I think they messed up is that they thought they could subvert the democratic process and install a puppet leader. They really thought that they could do it. They thought that they could push Joe Biden out forcefully and threaten him and his whole family, which is exactly what they did, and put in Kamala Harris, just this empty suit, this nonsense individual, and a person who's literally never received a single vote in her favor as it pertains to president until last night, or even as it pertained to being a Democratic candidate for president until last night, and that it would all be good. And guys, I got to tell you, I thought they were going to pull it off. Like, I'm not going to sit here and, Monday morning quarterback and be like, oh yeah, I saw this coming the whole time. I didn't see this coming at all. And almost every pundit today that's pretending like they saw this coming, they're liars. They're freaking liars. They were all worried too. Listen to yesterday's episodes, whether you were listening to Charlie Kirk or Glenn Beck or Ben Shapiro or Matt Walsh or whoever your person was. People were not confident, right? They were like mildly optimistic. Now, they're all running laps right now, and for good reason. But again, they thought they could subvert the democratic process of their own people, and just didn't work out that way. But this is where I don't think the Democrats messed up. I don't think they messed up replacing Joe Biden, because you're hearing that this morning. You're hearing that. Oh, they messed up. They shouldn't have taken him out. They should have just left the guy in. He probably would have done better. Guys, Biden literally had no chance after the first debate. Go back and look, because there's some of those tickers that you can see kind of what the presidential chances for each candidate were over time. Go back to like 3 months ago, and then go back to 2 months ago. I think that was before Kamala was even in the race, right? Go back to those times. Joe Biden had no shot whatsoever. Like, there was the potential that if Biden was in there, that he would have even could have lost Minnesota, could have lost New Hampshire, could have lost some, places that just don't vote for Republicans. It's very, very likely that Trump would have won by an even larger electoral margin. And so like that's not really what we're talking about here. So I think that it was good for the Democrats, for their sake, at least in their mind, to push out Joe Biden because Kamala Harris had a better chance, but then not doing an actual vote where the Democrats could even choose their candidate, really just, that's what messed them up, not just pushing Joe Biden out. But as a side note, can you imagine the victory laps that Biden is about to run? Or I mean, not really run, more like shuffle. Can you imagine? Because the entire Democratic apparatus coalesced behind him and pushed him off the cliff. But for the rest of his days, which he may only have a few, but for the rest of his days, he can say, I could have won. I beat him once before. You put Hillary up there, she lost to him. And then you put Kamala up there, she lost to him. I'm the only one that beat him. For the rest of his life, he can claim, because again, we don't live in a parallel universe where, what if this team had played this team at this time? Nope. He's the only person to have beaten Donald Trump. He's the only guy with a winning record against Donald Trump, right? But the Democrats got rid of him. There's going to be a lot of victory laps right now. And here's another side note. I don't know that I actually believe this, but maybe. What if Biden actually was trying to sink Kamala a little bit? On that campaign stop where he put on the MAGA hat kind of as a joke, but then he left the hat on. The garbage comment saying that, Trump supporters were garbage, kind of knowing that, we don't really take kindly to when people call us deplorable or that we're bitter clingers or that we're garbage. We don't really like that as conservative Republicans. Is it possible that Biden was just like, watch this? Like, I'm the president right now? Because I do know in the final week of the campaign, the Kamala Harris campaign, they took Biden off of all of the things they had scheduled for him. So they scheduled him to do some stops. They scheduled him to do some media hits. They canceled all of that in the last week of the election. So maybe they saw some of that as well. But there is actually part of me in all of this that thinks that Joe Biden is just going to lean into this transfer of power thing after what the Democrats did to him. Because initially it's like you can't call the guy Hitler and, the guy that's going to destroy democracy and then just like hand the keys of power over to him. But I think Joe Biden might. It'll almost be like his final FU to the party that screwed him over after he gave 50 years of his life to him. So ultimately, I guess the Democrats better hurry up and get rid of Joe Biden for real, like in the Clinton way, before he writes a biography and exposes everything that happened. So hopefully they can pull that off. And if not, it'll be fun for all of us to read. Hey guys, real quick. Very early on in Undaunted.Life, I knew I wanted to partner with a meat delivery service, but I didn't know which one to do. So I tried out several different ones, and here's the thing that I found out about some of the most popular brands that you've heard of before. These are people that are sending you stuff that is produced here in the United States, but every single month you might be getting beef from a different farm. And so one month your box may be full of amazing beef, and the very, very next month you're going to get stuff that isn't up to snuff and stuff that you don't want to feed yourself or your family. And so I wanted to partner with a farm, with an operation, with a cattle producer that is giving you the same high quality beef every single month. And that's why I want you to use the official beef delivery partner of Undaunted.Life, Primal Beef. Primal Beef is a cattle operation owned and operated by Sean Glass. He's a retired Navy SEAL that partnered with Jocko Willink, yes, that Jocko Willink, to launch Primal Beef. So what makes Primal Beef different from the other beef delivery companies? It's a combo of the following. It's all American Black Angus cattle. The beef comes from one farm, and that's in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley. The beef is all natural, no hormones ever, no antibiotics ever, no mRNA ever. After slaughter, the entire carcass is dry aged and then hand cut by artisan butchers and then flash frozen to ensure that it maintains tenderness, marbling, and flavor. And here's another cool thing. For every box sold, Primal Beef donates meat directly to a member of America's Special Operations Forces through the C4 Foundation. So you can take pride in knowing that your purchase will help put literal food on the table for America's finest warriors. Are you salivating yet? If not, it's probably because you're a communist. Don't be a communist and try Primal Beef out today by going to www.primalbeef.com. That's primalbeef.com. Use the promo code Kyle to get $25 off your first order. Again, that's primalbeef.com. Promo code Kyle, Kyle, to get $25 off your first order. All right, so I've got a bunch of random thoughts on this before we move on to the abortion stuff, which is just absolutely disappointing. So let's stay in the world of the fun for right now. We're literally, or I guess we were literally, guys, a few centimeters away from all of this being different. Because again, you've all seen the video at this point. You've all seen that like rendering. I posted it on our Instagram where at the last millisecond, Trump turns his head and the bullet that would have literally taken off the back of his head just grazes his ear. So I don't like being hyperbolic, especially as it pertains to God, but you would be hard pressed to argue against the fact that God, didn't have his hand on this, right? Do I think that Trump is next Jesus, right? Or all that? No, like I'm not doing any of that nonsense, but like, again, you have to go back to the scripture from the beginning, Daniel 2:21. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. And guys, I just got to tell you, like I was ready. I literally was ready for Donald Trump to lose this and for Kamala to win. And I had already had my episode kind of mapped out, and it was going to be Kamala Harris's America's Judgment. That her as our leader, as the female leader of this country, being as left-wing and as crazy as she is, that she was going to be our judgment for being such a godless nation for as long as we have. But for whatever reason, that's not happening, at least not right now. Another random thought is that, I'm obviously trying to figure all this out because this is the morning after. You're trying to like, okay, what exactly is all this mean? And we don't have all the exit polling yet. We don't even know who's going to win the House technically. And so I guess I'm just trying to figure out and process, why did we get a red wave this year and not 2 years ago? Because the red wave was absolutely expected 2 years ago, not last night. We got it last night and not 2 years ago. Because the Democrats were just as bad back then. They were just as crazy. The races were just as winnable for the Republicans. But I guess even as I kind of, process this in my head as I'm talking out loud right now, the big difference does kind of come back to how the Democrats comported themselves over the last 2 years, using the justice system to try to keep Trump from running. They tried to kill him. Again, whoever they is, they literally usurped the will of their own people and their own party by installing their chosen candidate during the primary. And I guess the Americans just signaled, hey, we don't exactly like that. And so that wasn't there 2 years ago. It was this time, and it worked out how it worked out. Another random thought is, can we all just go ahead, Democrats, Republicans, independents, libertarians, you losers, can we all just go ahead and just admit that Biden didn't actually get 80 million plus legitimate votes in 2020? Again, I have not been beating the drum of the 2020 election was stolen. Again, I maintain there was definitely chicanery, but it didn't seem to be enough chicanery to overturn the results of the election. And the Trump people and his lawyers did not prove that in court. He had the chance to, and he didn't even allege it. So we just need to be done with 2020, especially now that Biden and Kamala are out and Trump's going to be back in. But 80 million. Biden got 80 million votes. Really? Trump, in a landslide victory this year, got 71 million, but Biden got 10 million more than that. Biden outperformed Kamala by 14 million votes 4 years ago, as opposed, compared to Kamala now. Come on, guys, just let that one go. Another random thought is, and this makes me sad, and again, I hope I'm wrong, but in a way, I think this means that Ron DeSantis' political career is likely over when he leaves the Florida governor's mansion in 2026. So some of you might be like, Kyle, that's ridiculous because Trump can only be in office for another 4 years. Yeah, but this is the MAGA Republican Party. This is someone like J.D. Vance, who is not nearly as conservative as Ron DeSantis. Someone like Tulsi Gabbard, who until 7 seconds ago was actually a Democrat, and I don't believe she's actually flipped her opinions on things that truly conservative people actually believe. It's people like Joe Rogan, who has never voted Republican in his entire life, but voted so this time, but is not even close to being a conservative in most of the most important areas. Ron DeSantis is a very effective, very legitimate conservative. So let's just say the next 4 years go well. Are there going to be people clamoring for Ron DeSantis? Again, Ron DeSantis leaves the Florida governor's mansion in 2026. The election's in 2028. So he's just going to do nothing for a year and a half and then say, I'm running for president. And people are going to be like, yeah, we need you. Or is it going to be someone that's in the vein of a J.D. Vance, Tulsi Gabbard? Again, we got a lot. I'm not here to talk about 2028 yet, right? But I do think that means his career is over. Now, Ron DeSantis is not, he's going to be able to write his ticket just about anywhere to whatever think tank, whatever law firm he wants to go be a part of. And at this point, it's like you've been one of the most effective leaders. You literally turned Florida from a very purple state into a deeply red state. Like you can always have that feather in your cap, but I think that his time might be done. Again, I hope I'm wrong. Now, flipping from a candidate that I really like to a candidate that I don't like at all, can we please be done with Carrie Lake now? Can we please be done with her? I mean, she seems like a nice gal and all that, but she got beat by a houseplant for the governor's mansion there in the state of Arizona. And then for whatever reason, you morons in the Republican Party in Arizona thought that Carrie Lake would be the one. Carrie Lake is the one that's going to get the job done. I mean, she's literally, I'm stealing this joke from Ryan Horn. He said it in a group text last night. It was great. She's the right's Beto O'Rourke. She's just like a disease that just doesn't go away. You think it's gone and the rash comes back again. She's probably a nice lady. She seems like she might even be legitimately a Christian for all we can tell. But the gal just can't win an election. Arizona won big time for Donald Trump. And yet she lost big time as the Republican candidate for Senate. Okay? That's a 6-year mistake, guys. A 6-year mistake. We've got to be done with stuff like that. Carrie Lake, maybe go back to media, maybe open up your own podcast thing, do your own thing, but please stop running for office. Also, random thought. A lot of people, because I'm already seeing this, and it's kind of delicious because I fully intend to just fight it with every fiber of my being. But a lot of people, especially, progressive Christians, they're going to tell us and have been telling us to do exactly what they told us to do when Roe v. Wade was overturned. Don't celebrate. Don't post, things that say that you're happy online, because there are people that are hurting this morning. There are progressive Christians that voted for Kamala and they're just falling to pieces this morning. There are baristas right now that just can't get up off the floor and make your mocha chocolate latte. They just can't do it. Don't celebrate. That's not Christ-like. But those losers can kick rocks, okay? Because if Trump had lost, we would be staring down the barrel of a potential World War III, a federal abortion law, blanket amnesty for illegal immigrants, which would destroy the election system in the United States, which also with potential federal election control, more children being mutilated and sterilized because they're gender confused, and on and on and on and on and on and on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Lose me with the don't celebrate thing. This is a great morning. Because here's another thing that not enough people talked about, and even in the lead up to the election, I just didn't have it in my analysis, but it certainly was there. Don't you think that there would be an uptick in federal government and these pagan entities coming after Christians and churches if Kamala Harris had gotten into office? If the Democrats had kept control of the United States Senate and taken control of the United States House? Because they're already locking up pro-lifers. They're locking up January 6 people, even though no one that was a part of these BLM riots and murders, or none of those people are in prison. Don't you think that would have gone up? So to you progressive Christians or to you squishy Republicans saying, hey, let's kind of tamp this all down, suck it. I ain't going with that. All right, another random thought here is that 8 different states, including my state of Oklahoma, thank goodness, thank God, passed laws requiring ID in order to vote, requiring proof of citizenship in order to vote. This is like the easiest slam dunk. I think there was like 120,000 people in Oklahoma that voted against this. It's like when like 1.2 million people voted for it. It's like, this is the easiest thing in the world. Like of all the dumb things that the left believes, this is one of the dumbest, right? That they're trying to actually convince people that if you ask someone to show their ID, that's racist. And how paternalistic is it to say that, oh, people of color, they just don't know how to get IDs. It's one of the dumbest things ever. So congratulations to those 8 states, including my state of Oklahoma, for making that happen. And my last thing here in terms of the random thoughts is keep your head on a swivel until Inauguration Day and thereafter. There's going to be a lot of nonsense going on. That's a message for all of us and certainly for Trump. It's like you had some bullets whiz past your head already. You almost got killed on your own golf course. It's like, can we please get this guy some security and bulletproof glass and maybe one of those Pope mobiles where they kind of, run you around where you're not just kind of sitting out there waving at everybody. But in the end, before I get to the stuff that makes me sad, in the end, guys, I'll wrap up my comments on the national elections by saying this. I guess the Democrats shouldn't have messed with Peanut. R.I.P. Peanut. But now let's get into the crap that I don't want to talk about, because Donald Trump had a great night. A lot of Republican politicians had a great night last night. But Moloch, right, the demon of child sacrifice, unfortunately, had a great night on Tuesday. A great night. So it became clear after Roe was overturned that many Americans and many politicians were not nearly as pro-life as even they thought they were or had signaled publicly. And so we had seen these pro-abortion legislations and laws go into place in a lot of places around the country over the last couple of years, even in places like Kansas, very, very red states. But last night, the states of Arizona, Colorado, Maryland, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, and New York all passed pro-abortion laws. So even like the state of Missouri, because that's the closest one to me on that list that I put out there, because again, those are purple, blue, and red states, right? If you look at it, right? In the state of Missouri, there was laws on the books basically that prevented abortion from happening at all in the state of Missouri, and now they push it all the way out to the time of viability, which they're calling like 24 weeks. And as we've seen plenty of examples of, there are babies born at 23, 22, 21 weeks that are able to be kept alive and can go on to live happy, healthy lives. And so it's an absolutely devastating thing. There were two bright spots. So the states of Florida and South Dakota, both states struck down pro-abortion measures in their states. And just to talk about Amendment 4 a little bit, because I did my pro-life presentation called Defeating Pro-Abortion Arguments back at Church of 1122 in Jacksonville back earlier this year. And I talked about Amendment 4, and I talked about how awkwardly it was worded and how most of these votes, these pro-abortion votes in these other states had, gotten to that 60% threshold. And that was the thing in the state of Florida is they had that 60% threshold, but it was still kind of like, oh crap, what's this going to be like? But it was defeated. It was defeated last night. And so that would have made abortion legal in Florida all the way up to the point of birth. So Florida would have became not just a destination for the beaches, but hey, go sit on the beach and then we'll take you into a clinic and kill your child and then we'll send you back out to the beach, this time with a drink, right? That's what Florida was going to be. They also defeated, I think it was Amendment, 3 or whatever it was called. So it was against like public weed and all that. So again, we don't need more places with public weed. Go to any major city in America and it just smells like an ashtray full of weed and bongs and things like that. So we don't need that. So good for you guys in Florida. But here's the thing. Florida and Ron DeSantis, right, should be used as a how-to guide for squishy Republican governors and squishy state legislatures across the country. Because we have been reliably informed that if you don't moderate on the issue of life, you will lose. But here's the message, and it became loud and clear last night. Thank goodness for the voters of Florida. You don't have to moderate on abortion to win. The state of Florida was bright red last night, and Amendment 4 has been in everyone's face this entire time. And guys, I remember me saying this not that long ago, that I was worried about the state of Florida. This was when Kamala Harris wasn't even in the race yet, because I thought that Amendment 4 was going to really, really get those single women and those college-educated dummies to come out and vote. And if they're in there voting for baby sacrifice and baby murder, they may as well vote for Joe Biden, right? That didn't happen last night. They gave us the playbook. All we have to do is follow it. And also, the actions of pastors like, I know I mention them all the time, but what Joby Martin did in Florida, he hasn't talked about it publicly, but I'm going to talk about it publicly because I don't give a crap. He was one of the leading people, him and Ron DeSantis, to get pastors to stop being so squishy on the subject of abortion, to stop being so intimidated by the women in their congregations that have had abortions or the men in their congregations that have paid for abortions, and said, guys, we've got to stand up. Like, this is our Germany in the 1930s moment, right? 1940s moment. That this is our time. Again, go back to the book, Letter to the American Church by Eric Metaxas. If just a few thousand more German pastors had said no to the German Nazi Party and said no to the Third Reich and no to Adolf Hitler, there would have been no World War II, no Holocaust, and tens of millions of people would still have been alive during that time. Okay? And so Joby Martin spent time speaking to hundreds, if not thousands of pastors saying, you've got to talk about this from the pulpit. Like, again, I forget whether it was him that said it or Josh Howerton or whoever, but it's like, look, when you tell churches to stay in their lane, that argument makes sense until you get into their lane, right? When you pull off into the lane of theology and life and image bearers of God, now you're in the lane of the pastors. But only if the pastors push back will it be effective. So we need more pastors like Joe B. Martin to speak up on these subjects when it pertains to their actual communities. Because I remember talking to Joby years ago that there was I think a mayoral election in the state of Jacksonville, or the city of Jacksonville rather, and he didn't talk about it from the pulpit or really make a big thing about it. And a very unrighteous, immoral leader was elected in their community, and their church was at that time, I don't think they were maybe around 20,000, maybe a little bit less. They're maybe around 25,000 or something now. But had Joby hit it hard, there's a very good likelihood like that woman would not be in power. Okay. And so I don't think that he said this verbatim to me, but it's like, I'm not going to let something like that happen again. Not on my watch. Not whenever there's a congregation of people that in a biblical way, we can point them towards a biblical value as it pertains to their ballot. So we need more governors like Ron DeSantis. We need more pastors like Joe B. Martin. So my thoughts on some of the stuff that happened last night with the pro-abortion legislation is, as happy as I am that Amendment 4 didn't pass in Florida and that, the state of South Dakota took care of business, we have to be sober-minded and realize that the only reason it didn't pass in the state of Florida is because of the 60% threshold. Because in every single one of those 10 states that I mentioned, the 2 that didn't pass the legislation, the 8 that did, except for South Dakota, I'm pretty sure, except for South Dakota, the plurality or the majority of the voters actually voted for the pro-abortion legislation, including the state of Florida. That's what we're up against, guys. No, thank God Florida did not get to the 60% threshold, but they got to over 50. They did. That's what we're up against. The level of demonic influence and seared consciousness that we're seeing on the subject of life is so dire, and we're in such a bad spot. But this morning, there are some people that are happy. So I guess all those liberal white women can be excited that babies will be slaughtered in states that they don't even live in, because these women are freaking out and crying and posting terrible things on social media in states where they could kill their children if they wanted to, but they just really, really don't want you backwards conservatives to be able to kill your children in their state, right? Or in a different state. And also, I guess all those soy boy beta male guys that voted for Kamala Harris for their daughter's sake can feel like they came away with some bit of a victory from last night. Because I saw a lot of different people. A lot. Well, actually, I'm going to pull them up. I'm calling them out right here. Okay. Because I posted this online. People are like, you shouldn't call people out by name. It's like, well, if I know their name, I'm going to call them out by name, moron. Okay. A guy named Ryan Shead, Shead. Apparently he's like a sports commentator guy. So he posts, he's standing out there in his Arizona stuff and it's there, the sun's going down or whatever. My name is Ryan. I'm a 42-year-old husband, father, and veteran. I voted for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz to protect my daughter's right to choose. How about you? Hashtag Harris Walz 2024. So I would, if I could be him, I would have, recalibrated and rewritten what he said. What I would have said is, my name is Ryan Shead. I have my pronouns in my bio, and I want to make sure that my daughter can have the right to choose to kill my grandchildren someday. On CNN yesterday, there was this guy that went in and voted for Kamala Harris, came out, he's talking to a CNN reporter, he's got daughters, and this freaking pussy starts like choking up and like at how good he feels about the fact that he voted for Kamala Harris for the sake of his daughters, because he wants his daughters to have the right to choose someday. Because these people have bought into the lie that there is only one body involved in the abortion. Again, even a guy like Joe Rogan, he's saying things right now saying like, hey, what do men know about abortion? As if abortion doesn't affect men. It certainly affects males that are in the womb, and it affects the males who are having their progeny murdered, right? A lot of times against their will. Men that would like to have these kids, but the woman just goes into a clinic and pays a few $100s and gets the problem taken care of, right? But in this particular situation, you have these guys that have bought into the lie so hard that they're brought to tears, because they're so excited that their daughters could potentially kill their children someday, their grandchildren. Think about where you have to be mentally and as a man to be excited by that prospect. That's where we're at. That's what we're up against, because those guys are not anomalies. This dork that posted this on Twitter and this, moron outside of the ballot booth talking to the CNN reporter, there are a lot of men like this. There are a lot of men that are being led by their wives, who are allowing their wives to steer the ship, to be the head of the household, and these guys are just thermometers. They're not thermostats. They're certainly not leading their wives and catechizing their children. These are people that are certainly not even Christians, right? So we should pray for them to have their eyes open, to repent, to accept Christ, all the things. But we have got to push back against this ideology. And we push back against it with our votes. And we also push back against it by putting things out there that are correct. Because it is incorrect to have someone say, my body, my choice, and you go, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Because there are two bodies involved. They are separate entities. They have separate but equal moral worth. The geographic location of the baby inside of the mother's womb does not mean that we can usurp their rights to life. It actually means we should protect that life even more fervently than the woman's life, because the baby inside cannot protect itself. This isn't hard. This isn't hard. We have to stop punting on this issue. Pastors, stop punting on this issue. Politicians, stop punting on this issue. Guys out there that don't like rocking the boat, they don't like getting into fights, they don't like awkward conversations, stop punting on this issue, okay? Life literally is hanging in the balance. I'm so tired of hearing people moralize and philosophize their positions away because they're cowards, because they don't want to spend the time thinking through the arguments, and they don't want to potentially put relational chips in the center of the table that could potentially lead to the protection of innocent image bearers of God and their lives being able to come to fruition outside of the womb. I'm tired of it. I'm over it. The pro-life movement has a big job to do. A big job to do. We are behind. We are behind. We are in a bad place post Roe v. Wade, but we can switch it up. We can change things, because most people would actually be pro-life if they knew what abortion was about. You see these man on the street interviews where live action and people will show them a 60-second video of what an abortion actually looks like, and they're like, oh, shoot, I didn't know this was actually what was going on. Gosh, if I had known this, I never would have advocated for this in the way that I did. Most of these people are low IQ as it pertains to this issue. They don't have the necessary information to make an informed decision, because they've either blinded themselves or they've just ignorantly bought into the lies that are coming from the satanic pro-abortion side of the aisle. It is our job to correct the record. It is our job to inform them. So guys like me going and speaking at churches, I need more churches to bring me in to teach you how to take care of these pro-abortion arguments. I take the top 18 pro-abortion arguments and I show you how to systematically break them down and defeat them. If you are ill-equipped for the fight, you will lose. You will not rise to the occasion. You will fall to the level of your training. Guys, we have a job to do. If you are a pro-lifer, you've got to get into the game. You've got to get your head right. You've got to get into the fight. All right, guys, that'll do it for today. Our sponsor today, again, was Primal Beef. We're so thankful to Primal Beef, guys. Again, go to primalbeef.com. Use the promo code Kyle to get 10% off of your order. But before we let you go, we are going to do a quick resilience boost. At Undaunted.Life, our mission is equipping men to push back darkness with content that forges spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. The only link I've got for you today is a link to our donation page, guys. We can't do any of this without donors, so we need guys like you hopping in on a monthly basis to support us. Undaunted.Life/donate. That is here in the show notes. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a positive 5-star review. If you want me to come speak live at your event or on your podcast, just shoot me an email to info@Undaunted.Life. That's info@Undaunted.Life. Follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook, and check out our website for everything else, including how to donate to keep more content like this coming your way. Just go to www.Undaunted.Life. And as always, we want to thank the band Holy Name for allowing us to use their music for our content. The music on this podcast is their song Perpetua, which is off their self-titled debut album on Face Down Records. The links are in the description. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Remember, keep pushing back darkness, keep forging spiritual, mental, and physical resilience, keep seeking the Lion of Judah.